Welcome to When Love Hurts, a podcast that explores the abuse of women by men through women's stories and expert insight.
We break down what abuse really is beyond physical violence and look at its deep emotional, psychological, and societal impact.
This podcast is designed for everyone, survivors, support persons, and professionals.
Let's begin. Thanks for joining us again. I'm here with my co-host Alison. I'm Jo, by the way, and joining us like always, the authors of the book When Love Hurts, Jill and Karen. And today we're going to be tackling the question of why abusive men are abusive. But first, our land acknowledgement.
I want us to pause for a moment and acknowledge we are on the unceded territory of the Wasanic people on the far west coast of Canada.
As we shared last time, we are all in this house together to record these first episodes. There is an elephant in the room, if you haven't noticed, and you're watching on camera, is sweet Jo has a mask on her face. And that is just to protect us all because she's feeling a little raspy today. So you may hear that in her voice, and we're calling it just a little bit more of a sultry feel to her voice. But we're having an awesome time together, and we worked really and have been working really hard. So last night we finally decided, okay, let's take a bit of a break, and we all went different directions. Karen, what did you do for your break?
I spent some time in the hammock that is here at this beautiful house, and it was lovely. Anyone who knows me knows me. I love getting in a hammock, and it was great to do that and just feel that being held, and it was so nice and restful. It was great.
Lovely. How about you, Jill?
Well, we had a lovely dinner together that Karen provided, and then I'm a baseball fan, so I was catching up on some baseball and a little bit of time with my lovely partner who's been looking after all of us so much over the last couple of days. And so it was nice just to have a little bit of time together. So.
A big nod to David Corey, who is helping us with so many things.
Yeah.
Yes, he's been incredible.
Yeah.
It's great.
Jill?
What did I do? Oh, I snuck out and I went for a lovely Indian meal with one of my adult children. And it was absolutely delightful. The food, the company. Yeah, had a lovely, lovely time.
With your
wonderful
son, hey?
Yeah.
I joined my in-laws. We did a bit of a girls' night with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law and her sweet girls. And it's really nice I'm actually close to my in-laws, and they are incredible people, and I'm very grateful for them. So having their support and love is really, really, really lovely. So we hope you, our listeners, get to do something lovely today and just take care of yourself. The content we share, while it is very, very important, is heavy. And so we want to make sure that you are also taking care of yourselves. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so today we want to talk about why is he abusive? Women are really, really desperate to understand this question. What is his need for power and control? What's driving that? And also, how conscious is he of what he's doing? Often women are asking this, and it seems to be really pivotal for them.
Yeah, there's so many theories and explanations that float around, right? We've heard some that we've already talked about in previous episodes, but what are some of those theories that are floating around that we've heard from other women, or we've heard other professionals share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think one that immediately comes up is that it's an anger problem, right?
Yeah.
It's his anger. He's losing control. He needs to have an anger management program. But what we say is he's not angry, like, generally, like with his boss or with his friends. He's not struggling with his anger. He's making a choice to be angry and aggressive at home so that he can maintain power and control.
Yeah. Another one I've heard is he's really stressed out, or he's got anxiety, or he's feeling anxious, and he's dealing with high levels of stress at work and coming home, and that's just coming out, and including his work and everything else. He's just dealing with so much. So most people don't abuse as a result of their stress and a result of their anxiety, and they don't use stress and anxiety for harming other people.
Yeah, and that we think about all the women we support who are under enormous stress, right? Like moving through the legal system, the stakes are so high, so much financial stress. and they're not being abusive.
Exactly.
To,
It's not an excuse
No,
for
no,
abusiveness.
no way. No.
No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, you know, you mentioned anxiety, just the partner being mentally ill, just generally, right, is another understandable kind of explanation that women go towards.
Because his behavior seems so bizarre.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Exactly.
this is not normal behavior.
Yeah.
Women realize, well, this isn't normal behavior. He must have a mental health issue,
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly. Yeah. I had that exact same conversation with so many of my clients, and it seems to make sense. But again, we need to think, well, where does he display this bizarre behavior? Is he doing it to everybody else? Because if he's mentally ill, it logically would make sense that that's what's, you know, he would
it's going to
be-
show up everywhere
it
in
would
his life.
show, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, maybe he is mentally ill, but again, that is not the excuse or the cause of abusiveness. Men who are abusive are doing so to maintain power and control.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And we should add that mental illness does not mean then that it doesn't cause someone to be abusive.
No.
Yes. Right.
And, you know, sadly, lots of the women we support may have a diagnosis of depression
Yeah.
or struggling with anxiety, but that's not causing abuse, right?
Exactly.
We also hear lots that it was because of his childhood in one way or another. He was abused as a child, or he saw his father be abusive. And what I always think about with that one is I think about some of my closest friends who grew up with a lot of abuse in their family. They witnessed, they experienced a lot of abuse. And as they entered into adulthood, they decided they did not want to do that to anybody else.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it is no excuse for abuse in no way.
I think one of the other things that we often hear from women is that the abuse follows his use of substances. And so they think that addiction is the problem.
Yeah.
And they often talk about, well, he's only abusive when he's been drinking or using. And how we've come to understand that when we explore that more with women is that they're really talking about the explosion. Like it tends to escalate, his abuse escalates during the explosion as it relates to using substances, but it's not the problem. And what we know is that when men do get treatment and we remove the addiction part, they continue to be abusive. And we've kind of given them another excuse because now they're like, I'm trying to stay sober and I'm not myself. And so again, it gets folded in really messy ways, and it's hard to pull those two apart. But really for us, it's very clear that he continues to have power and control all the time. She's still intimidated by him all the time. So all those other power and control tactics are there, whether he's using or not. And so that's how, similar to mental health, we know that there could be both things existing, but one isn't causal to the abuse, like the addiction isn't.
And they're not treated as separate issues.
Right.
Right. Like,
Yeah. And what's interesting, and maybe you've had this experience too, sometimes abusive men are sent to treatment, to substance use treatment.
Right.
As if that's the problem.
Because the system will think that's the problem,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yes.
So it's very confusing for women because he's telling her and then the system responds that way. But in our experience, we know that removing alcohol or substances does not remove the abuse, and especially around all the power and control tactics. And it can be a distraction, right? Any of these excuses can be a distraction to avoid naming the abuse and asking him to take responsibility for his behavior. And so if everybody's kind of looking over here at the substance use and he needs to go to treatment, then we're not really looking at the core problem.
Yeah.
right. Right.
And I think you're pointing to something that can be a really painful realization for women if she is aware that he is abusing substances and he's also abusive. Those are actually two separate problems. And ultimately, he would actually need to seek treatment and accountability and for both of those things.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's hard. That's a hard piece to realize sometimes.
Yeah. Because both of them sort of tend to be attached to unwillingness to get treatment for, right? So it would feel very discouraging for a woman to think, I mean, now he has to be willing to do it in both those aspects.
Another one that I've heard a lot is it's his conflict style. And that can come from counselors saying such. which abuse is not an acceptable conflict style. And conflict is really how we understand conflict. It's two differing and opposing perspectives that are in disagreement. Abuse is domination and harm caused by one person to another. So conflict is two getting both differing and opposing perspectives in disagreement, kind of on equal playing fields. We can be in conflict, Joe and I.
Yeah.
Like, I don't agree with
Wearing a pink mask.
wearing a pink mask. I would only want to wear a black one.
Oh, that one.
Oh my God. I don't know.
Yeah.
But pink is acceptable for you. But in abuse, domination and harm are caused by one person to another. So it's not conflict at all.
Right, because conflict implies mutuality, that both
Exactly.
people are equally involved and that there's some safety there to have those disagreements. And that's different than abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I will also add that conflict is healthy, right? We have to have conflict in relationships.
Yeah.
And abuse is definitely not healthy.
Right. And I think sometimes abusers make that argument too, that it's okay to have conflict, but it's actually abuse. And so
Yes.
that's very confusing for women, that they're told that they're just avoiding the conflict.
Yeah.
But actually they're smart enough to know they're avoiding the risk.
Yeah, exactly. One that I've been hearing a lot lately is that it's to do with neurodivergence. You know, women are wondering, is my partner autistic? I've also heard that men have been diagnosed by psychologists as having severe ADHD, and that's being given as a reason for the behavior and what's happening in the relationship. And this sense of the abusive man doesn't seem to understand. This is what I'm hearing from women.
Right.
Just doesn't seem to understand when I'm telling him that what he's doing is hurting me. And, you know, women they're simply trying to make sense of something that is really confusing. Why doesn't he understand? Yeah, I mean, it's so confusing. Is what he's saying true, or is he actually being manipulative and using abuse? And it's just such a shocking thing to have to conclude about your partner. We just want to say as well that, you know, most people who are autistic or have some neurodivergence, they're not abusive.
No.
They just are not.
Yes.
It's just such a great way for an abusive man to avoid taking responsibility and keep his confusing behavior going.
Men have lots of explanations for themselves, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I worked in the treatment program for men who are abusive and support programs for women, we would interview every man before they came into the group to see whether they were ready for group. And we heard so many explanations from them. Again, if listeners remember, they're voluntarily coming, they're not court mandated. So, you know, and to some extent, they have identified there is a problem.
Yeah.
But they were very happy to tell us about the problems that their partner had, that the outside world had. And so that was the first thing, is that they were never just kind of stepping up to the plate and saying, I'm abusive and I need help.
Yeah.
But they often reduce the problem to their partner, to blaming her for if she hadn't. And again, I think that's a very common thing that we hear. And if you think about back to the cycle, that if she hadn't done this, I wouldn't have had to escalate to do that. And so that's really, we heard that a lot. They wanted us to understand the whole situation, right? And about how terrible she was in general. Or they just named it as a fight and, again, neutralized it, made both of them equally responsible. Lots of stories of just conflict, and then the distractions. Like, my work is really tough right now, and we're planning, her pregnancy is really really distracting us from intimacy right now. So there were always lots of excuses. There was also this idea that she was exaggerating, like it was just a small thing, and she'd really blown it out of proportion. But here he is, so he'll do his part. But there was never, you know, like, we never had the impression that they were really ready to dig in, and nor did, as lots of people in counseling, nor should he have known how much work he had to do. But it is interesting that there are so many excuses available to men that they're very easily accessible. And so that got repeated always. And And the one thing, and we'll talk a little bit about this later too, that men who are abusive don't demonstrate is empathy. Like they were never showed concern for how their partner had been hurt emotionally or what the children had seen. And that was kind of a common theme, that the lack of not just empathy, but really the lack of caring about how his behaviors were affecting somebody he said he loved was really quite painful to witness.
It feels like this might be a good time to tell a little bit more about my own story. That, I mentioned that I experienced abuse, and that's what drew me into the relationship. And what's different with my story than for Allison or Joe, and really for most women that we support, is that my partner actually changed. And I'd like to share a little bit about that, because I think it's helpful to understand what change might really look like.
Yeah.
Because what every woman we meet, certainly early on, is really hoping her partner's going to change. So Bruce was abusive for the first many years of our relationship, 6 years of our dating life, and for the first 4 years of our marriage. And as I said earlier in another episode, I knew I was getting hurt, but I had absolutely no language to describe what was going on. But I wanted things to change. And so in those first few years of marriage, as things got worse, as they often do, I took us to couples counseling.
Yeah.
I saw individual counseling, like we were seeking support from experts, and nobody did anything that was helpful. Misnaming it communication issue, family of origin issue, and so on and so forth. We were actually seeing a counselor who said, the problem is, Karen, that you distance from Bruce, and so he pursues you. This is a family systems idea.
Yeah.
And so I was told by the counselor, Karen, you need to stand your ground. Like that's going to solve the problem. So the next time that Bruce was upset about something, that I had not done something that he believed I should have done, I simply stood my ground. I just said, I've had a busy day. I haven't had a chance. And Bruce became physically abusive. And among other things, actually broke my rib. So some time went by after that, and I just got really clear that I wanted to tell some people about this. I think what I said to Bruce is, I'm not going to my grave with this. We're going to tell someone about this. And fortunately, we told our two closest friends, who had such a good response. They were so clear about holding Bruce 100% accountable and wanting to support me. And they told Bruce that he needed to go to a group for men who were abusive.
Ooh.
And so Bruce went to a program very much set up in the ways that Jill was just talking about, the program that she was doing. And he went, and he kept going, and he worked hard. This is a very public story. Everybody in our life knows this story. So I'm not talking about Bruce behind his back, and he's spoken publicly about this. And he would say he was really motivated to change because he thought he had everything to lose.
Okay.
He was studying to be a pastor at the time. So he thought, if I don't get this, I'm going to lose my wife.
Yeah.
I'm going to lose all my friends and family. I'm going to lose my vocation. So he was highly motivated. And I think often men who are abusive are not very motivated because there aren't any consequences. They might ultimately lose their partner, but they're not going to lose their job. They're not going to lose their friends. They're not going to lose their family. Like we see how people rally around these poor men, right? Whose wives have ended their relationship. So he worked really, really hard. And he told me about the group for women. That's how I found out about it. And I went to the group for women, and that was totally life-changing for us. And so we both did about 24 weeks of group work. And then I was asked if I felt like things might be safe enough to work more as a couple.
Oh,
and so
okay.
my female counselor, who was Jill, and Bruce's male counselor, and Bruce and I worked together for many, many weeks after that. I would not call it marriage counseling. It was 100% focused on abuse. both of the counselors held on to the belief that I knew how to do relationship,
Yeah.
and that Bruce really needed to look at his underlying belief system that was causing the abuse.
Yeah.
And I'll come back around again and say a little bit more about our story, but I think that leads us into what actually does cause abuse, which is the underlying belief system of abusive men. Yeah.
And so we were fortunate enough in our treatment program to have the School of Social Work at the University of British Columbia be involved with our service to evaluate how effective the programs are, because typically they're not very successful in terms of changing men enough that they stop being abusive and change their belief system. So they tested a couple of different models, and they also did interviews with men before they started the program and at the end. And what came through very, very clearly were these 3 ideas about the beliefs that they had that kind of enabled them to be abusive.
And those beliefs are that the man who's abusive believes that he is supposed to be central, superior, and deserving in the relationship. So we'll give you some examples to hold on to those words and what's maybe meant by those words. So central is this idea that he is supposed to be the center of the household and everything is supposed to revolve around him. So his work, his hobbies, his interests are what's central and is most important. He believes that he can demand attention whenever he wants it and that the woman should be there to help and assist him. I'll share an example of that. A woman was telling me that, she had a toddler and a newborn, and her husband had to get up at 6 a.m. to get off to work. And every single morning, he woke the 3 of them up, like, who ate the last yogurt? Where are my socks? Did somebody move my phone? Right? And, any of us who function from a relationship belief system would be like, let the mom and the baby and the toddler sleep, right? But he was central, and him getting off to work was what mattered, and what was going on for the other people in that household didn't matter. That everything tends to get scheduled around his needs. We even see this with separation agreements and parenting times, that so often the judge will make the decision about the parenting time based on what is most convenient for the man.
Right.
And often is very inconvenient for the woman. So it gets backed up in society as well. Superior is that idea that he sees himself as better than the woman in anything that is important. So if he thinks computers and cars and politics is important, then he knows more, his beliefs are valid, hers are stupid or foolish, or she doesn't know anything about that. Maybe he doesn't know how to do the laundry, but then the laundry is not very important, right? So whatever is important, he knows more about. He thinks he's smarter. Often he will hold up his education as being more important than the woman's education, even if sometimes objectively the outside world would say, she actually did a harder program than you did or something. But what he holds up is most important.
Yeah. And if he doesn't have an education, then he mocks people who do have an education.
Right. Yes. What a
ivory
waste.
tower and a waste. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's important because the mocking piece can come out quite a lot, right? Is when there's something that's different than what he sees as superior,
Right.
then the mocking can start to play out as putting those people inferior to him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And he's definitely going to mock her beliefs, perhaps her values, her strengths, her gifts, her skills are going to be seen as inferior. And often he thinks he's superior to other men. And part of what is interesting about that is if they do go to a treatment program for men who are abusive, they often come home and say to their wives, oh, I'm not nearly as bad as those guys, right? Like, you're actually lucky you have me, right? And then deserving, and another word for deserving could be entitled. Deserving is that he just feels he deserves whatever it is he wants, right? This shows up a lot around things like rest and relaxation. So, we think about in how in many homes, mom and dad are both out working all day, but men who are abusive will believe that they are entitled to rest in the evening, right? And so the mom is doing the whole second shift of baths and story time and lunches and checking homework and all those things. And he's watching a game, or he's playing on his device or whatever. Shows up around holidays, that holidays need to be what is best for him, rather than, people who are relationship oriented talk about holidays in terms of what are both of our needs. And, so maybe what he wants is he wants to go off hunting with his buddies for 2 weeks, and he's just going to leave her at home with the kids, right? She doesn't even get a holiday. He definitely expects her to do much more of the household labor, also expects her to do much more of the parenting. Oftentimes women say that before separation, he did virtually no parenting, right? And yet at separation, all of a sudden he wants the kids 50% of the time.
Yes.
But he was very happy for her to do all that labor when they were together, because again, he expects to be able to focus on his hobby, his interests, his relaxation. He expects sex whenever he wants it and however he wants it. And he expects to be fed, just generally fed and cared for. So women sometimes talk about how it comes up with food. Women have described, the man throwing a dish of food across the room, why the hell would you think I'd want to eat this kind of thing, those sorts of attitudes, right? So that's the belief system that men who are abusive hold, that they believe they should be central, superior, and deserving. And just one little word about that. Men who are abusive are very capable of talking the talk of relationships. So they're not necessarily going to go around and say, I think I'm the king of the castle here and my way goes. They often can talk. Bruce, back when he was abusive, would talk about being pro-feminist, right? So they can talk the talk. And what women find is helpful is to look at the behavior. What is the behavior telling you about his belief system?
Yeah. And I think it is worth noting that the examples you shared, they may not fit for every abusive man, right? Like there isn't necessarily, like it may have not shown up with sex for some,
Right. Yeah.
or it could have shown up a lot. So it could look a little bit different than what we are describing.
Yeah.
But that same theme of central, superior, deserving is there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Allison. Yeah.
This idea that their beliefs means that they're so deeply held and often unconscious. And the thing about beliefs is we think we're right. Like we don't think we have to examine them. They are just correct. And so there are ideas that abusive men witnessed abuse as a child, and that's why they're abusing as an adult. The research does not hold that to be true. Of course, some have, but many have not witnessed abuse. But what they did grow up in is families where they saw kind of patriarchy in action. So they saw their dad being central, superior, and deserving in a kind of privileging gender. So the girls did the dishes and made the beds, and the boys got to play sports. And so they saw the inequality in action. And it may not have been coercive control, it may not have been abuse, but they saw gender inequality and they felt privileged from the beginning. And I think that entitlement is really where we teach boys the belief. And it's in the culture, Joe. You always say we're swimming in the waters of patriarchy.
Yeah.
So it's not that families even are specifically like dedicating their child rearing to, we're going to privilege boys. And, we're just kind of still unconsciously using those conventions of gender roles. And that's where boys learn that they are entitled. And so if a woman stands up to that, they feel like they're having something very fundamental challenged, or if she's trying to take something that is his right away from him.
Right.
The other side of the model to the model of power, the belief about being central, superior, and deserving, is the way the rest of us operate. Those in heterosexual or non-binary relationships, same-sex relationships, all of us can be in the relationship paradigm, except for abusive men. And so what does this relationship belief system look like? So the three words we use is that they're connected, equal, and mutual. And so what's connected? It means that you're doing things together. You're making decisions jointly. You're parenting in a way that where you share values and beliefs about how to do it. You might disagree, but you come to a conclusion together about how you're going to proceed, and you work it out. So there's more negotiation. You enjoy doing things together, right? So it's not one being forced into going along with what the other person wants. It's about really, we love spending time together and doing things together. What is it that we do together? But also, what can we do apart that isn't a threat to say, the abusive person? And individual needs do not come at the expense of the relationship needs or the family needs. And I think that's really important to recognize, because in the model of centrality, his needs always come first. And women are subjugated to either making do or just not having their needs met. And so in this one, there are negotiated needs, and both people, we recognize in relationships that we all have needs, and that we find ways to have both family needs met and individual needs met in balance, right? And then being equal. So again, this idea that maybe I like watching baseball and my partner likes playing music. So we make sure that we do enough to look after the family so that each of us can also pursue what's important to us and do what's important to us. So it's not that David, my partner, gets to just like finish dinner and go downstairs and play music all evening. We do dishes together, and we make sure that my mom's okay and the dog's walked, and then we can each kind of do something separately. And that we value each other. We're not the same, but we value each other's strengths.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And we've talked so much about how demeaning women is part of what abusive men do, and putting down things that we would think of as their strengths. But in a connected and mutual, respectful relationship where there's equality, then you're different, but they're both really equally valued.
Yeah.
And as is the contributions of each of us. And then mutual is that we share things. And, you can see how these three beliefs are kind of collapsing into each other because we just take them for granted as part of being in a relationship. But the idea of mutuality is that we share things, that care is given to each other, and that we have a lot of respect for each other. So unlike the control model, the belief system, where there isn't respect, that women don't get respected for what their contribution is, there is respect here for, I make a decision here, and Dave just says, I know that you know that part better, and I respect that, and so I trust you to do that. And I think, again, the idea that there is trust here for each other is really important to the relationship values.
Yeah.
Sometimes women really notice the mutual piece around if they're sick, right?
Yes.
That if he's sick, then she needs to give him a lot of attention. But if she's sick, some women describe, he just gets mad if I'm sick,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If I need to go lie down for a bit, he just gets mad about
because he's
that.
pissed off because he doesn't get to do what his needs aren't being met, and he has to actually fill in a little bit for her, possibly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Suddenly her needs are more important, which is highly unusual in that relationship, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Whereas when both people are in that mutual place, it's give and take, right? It's not just take. And there's this sense of, you might need more this week, and I might need more next week. And it's a very smooth kind of back and forth.
Like I can think of when my husband now started cleaning the bathroom one day without being asked. And I actually felt quite fearful, wondering what is it that I'm going to be expected to give, or
what's the price you're going to pay?
What's going to happen? And he was genuinely confused. Like, well, you cleaned the bathroom last time, I'm cleaning it this time. And it was just, that's that mutuality. Like we both get to share this household duty. We both use the toilet, and we will both clean it.
Yeah. So you've had the experience, Alison, of living with someone who's in that central superior deserving belief system, and now you're experiencing living someone who's in that connected, equal, mutual belief system. And if both people are living in that connected, equal, mutual belief system, relationship is possible, right? You can still have problems and challenges, right? You might have some financial issues. You might have some parenting ideas that are different, but it's actually possible. But if someone's going to insist on being central, superior, and deserving, that really pushes the other person into being peripheral, inferior, and serving. And we haven't met a woman yet who's like, oh, sign me up for that.
Right.
I'd like to be peripheral, inferior, and serving.
Yeah.
And so no woman is choosing that, but her partner is pushing her into that role in insisting that he's going to be central, superior, and deserving. And so then she's just a human being who at times will express a need or a desire or whatever. And then that's what causes him to be angry, right? Is that he's losing that privileged position. And that's what causes the anger, right? Is so at the foundation is the belief, which fuels the anger, which then fuels the behavior. But the belief is really the problem.
It's at the core.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we've sort of said before, it may not look like anger. It may look like silence. It may look like, the way that abusive men can punish and make sure that they kind of regain where they need to be can be in lots of it. They may just quietly threaten. They may just take one of the children for the day and not know where they are. But they will make sure that you know that you have somehow threatened their position.
Yeah. Take her off the credit card or something like that.
Yeah.
So just thinking about how these two paradigms work. So if the man is going to be in that central, superior, and deserving, and you perhaps a listener you've experienced this and you've been trying to hold on to this connected, equal, mutual. One of the things we definitely want to say is that if you're hearing this material for the first time, this might be quite revolutionary for you, because the way paradigms work is it's like the glasses that we are wearing that we see the world through. So you have always operated from this place of seeking in relationship to be connected, equal, and mutual. And you have probably assumed that's what everybody else is also trying to do, which is partly why your partner's behavior is so confusing, and perhaps why you spend a lot of time trying to make sense of it through that lens of connected, equal, mutual. Why is he doing this? And maybe having compassion and care and concern for him, because you're assuming he's trying to do the same thing. And in a similar way, he's wearing glasses of central, superior, and deserving. So he's looking at you through those lenses, and he's assuming you're trying to be central, superior, and deserving. And so women get accused of trying to be controlling, of being abusive, of being disrespectful, all those things, when actually it's the two paradigms coming together. So let me just unfold that a little bit. So when she tries to come alongside him and just be a partner, let's make this decision together, he experiences her as trying to take over, right? Because in his worldview, one of them is going to be central and the other is going to be peripheral. And he is not going to be peripheral, right? This partnership thing doesn't exist, right? Or if she's just trying to be treated as an equal, maybe he is constantly putting down her contribution to the household, and that could be her work, it could be caring for children, whatever it is, but he keeps putting it down. And she's just like, what I do is actually important. He's going to experience her as trying to be better than him.
Right.
Because again, one of us is going to be superior, one of us is going to be inferior. So he's going to feel this desire to put her back in her, kind of
in her
putting
place.
it in quotes, in her place, right?
Yeah.
And if she is just trying to be mutual, and maybe she thinks to herself, he goes out every week and plays poker with the guys. I heard some of the women at work talking about going out for dinner on Friday. I'd like to go out one night.
Yeah.
Right? That would be nice. So she comes home feeling good about this decision. Can you put the kids to bed on Friday night? I'm going to go out and have dinner with some of the women from work. And he will likely accuse her of being selfish, you know,
Right.
being a bad mother, being selfish, only thinking about herself. Like, don't you think I'm going to be tired on Friday? You know, right? So he is putting his worldview onto her behaviors. And that's a really helpful piece for women.
Absolutely.
Because they are often being accused of things and they're like, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be selfish. I'm not. I wanted to make this decision together. I'm not trying to take over. Right. So knowing that piece is helpful.
It can be really confusing too, because then that woman's also seeing themselves as like, am I?
Right.
Right? Like we asked that question
Yeah.
last time, like,
Yes.
am I actually being
Yeah.
really selfish? And am I actually being really naggy? And
Yeah.
I was like, I really don't want to be. I don't think I am, but she's saying I am. Maybe I am.
Yeah, and I think something that happens as well is that men who are abusive, when they speak, they often speak with such authority
Yeah.
that it really is undermining. When you are constantly faced with somebody who really believes in what they're saying so strongly, and you then, as the person who's being questioned, you do start to question yourself. Oh, well, then maybe he's right. I mean, he must be right. He's so adamant.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And when you think about women getting more and more isolated, that they depend more on that relationship for kind of knowing who they are, and that's part of that brainwashing problem, right? Is that the less exposed they are to other input about who they are and how lovely and amazing they are, the more he has say over her own understanding of herself.
Right.
And these ideas can be so they're so everyday.
Right.
Like she's just inviting him to come and help make the kids, dinner so that they can go out for a walk together. And what she's thinking about is spending some time together. And what he hears is there's no way she's telling me what to do.
Right.
Right. And so it can be like such small parts of the day where she's constantly thinking about what's in the best interest of everybody. And he's thinking, there's no way she's telling me how to act or what to do next or etc. So it can be in really small ways. And I think the other thing, Karen, that you were saying earlier around the, we're in connected relationship in that paradigm, what fools women is that the honeymoon looks like those values.
Yes.
So that's why women think that they're sharing this relationship belief system, is that he demonstrates that he knows those beliefs, and that's the trickery and that's the manipulation.
Yeah.
Is that if he showed just central, superior, and deserving from the beginning,
It would be so clear.
Yeah, it would be so clear, but it looks like he's showing relationship belief system.
Yeah. So if we come back to those two paradigms, what does this mean for women?
The good news is they know how to do relationship. They're not the problem. Well, that's such good news, because women are constantly being told that they're the problem, they need to do something different. But the bad news is that it's a whole change in the belief system of the man that needs to happen. And that's a really big thing for a person to do, to change their entire belief system.
And some women listening, this, there might be some sense of like, I know he's not going to do this level of work. And the honeymoon can leave women with the impression, because this, the good guy keeps coming back around.
Yeah.
It can leave women with the impression that just a bit of tinkering, we just get a little bit of counseling in there, and he can stay in that honeymoon. But, we're remembering that the whole cycle is abusive, and behind that cycle is this belief system of central, superior, and deserving, and he's using different tactics to maintain that position of privilege. So to realize that a whole paradigm change is necessary, sometimes as we're supporting women, for some women, this is the place where they're like, I don't think he's going to change, because they see what would actually be needed.
Yeah.
And maybe if I could, this might be a place to just say a little bit more about Bruce's process as someone who did change. So all of this was laid out for him, these two belief systems, that he was central, superior, and deserving, and I was functioning from this connected, equal, mutual. It took some time for him to really own that because, again, he could talk the talk, but he needed to look at his attitudes and beliefs and behaviors and realize, no, I really do operate that way. And so myself and our two counselors were inviting him to come over and live in this place of connected, equal, mutual. And he didn't think it existed, which really points to how powerful paradigms are, right?
Right.
He thought, he really did think everybody is only looking out for themselves.
Yeah.
You know, this is a dog eat dog world, every man for himself. I'm also trying to be central, superior, and deserving. For a while, he thought our two counselors were trying to trick him into letting me be central, superior, and deserving, and then he could be peripheral, inferior, and serving.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes when people are pushing back against feminism, it's because they're actually operating in that belief system and they think, oh, women are trying to take this privileged position that men have always had instead of, no, we all want us to operate in this connected, equal, mutual. So he didn't think it really existed. And years later, when he looked back on it, he said, someone might as well have said, open the wardrobe door. Narnia's on the other side, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, he took some steps, just kind of some steps in faith and tried to operate in this other way. And part of what was honestly really helpful was that our counselors told him many times, Karen knows how to do this. Karen knows how to do connected, equal, mutual. You actually have somebody that you could be asking how to do this. And imagine how that flips things on its head for a man who believes that he is central, superior, and deserving, that he could learn something from his wife. And I'll also say, you know, I was never asked to change anything. And I was listening through that whole process for something that I needed to change. And I was never asked to change anything. I am not a perfect person. But the problem was abuse, and the problem was the belief system. And so our counselors stayed focused on that, right? And I know from talking to women that so often when they go for marriage counseling, the counselor says something, you know, this is what you need to work on, Mr. Man, and this is what you need to work on, Ms. Woman, right? And that the woman is being asked to change things. And if the issue is abuse, then you just have to stay focused on those belief systems.
I think it's so, like, what strikes me the most about yours and Bruce's story is you had the right help.
Yes.
Is the help that you got was really incredible. And that's not easy to find.
Nope. It's
very difficult to find. But the other thing is it took time. It took a lot of time and effort, and it didn't happen fast.
Yeah.
How long did it take?
A couple of years, I would say. Yeah. And the other thing is, and Bruce would say this, and I would say anybody who knows what they're talking about in this field would say this too, is abusive men can never say, oh, I've arrived now. I don't need to work on this anymore. Right? That Bruce would say, I need to wake up every morning and decide to be connected, equal, mutual. Because for any of us, falling into old patterns is easy. And then there's also societal, you know, in some ways, to be a truly respectful, mutual man, you're kind of swimming against a lot of societal ideas, right?
Yeah.
Like when we were both working full time, we would spend, this was when things were good with us, we would spend the day together attending to everything that needed to, groceries, shopping, whatever. All his male colleagues in their days off were golfing, tinkering with cars, whatever, right? Like, so it is holding on to something very important that in some ways runs a little bit counter to some of the ideas in the society.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the statistics for change?
Well, they're really low.
Yeah.
Really, really low. I don't know that we can really give some strong statistics, but in my 25 years of doing this work, I can point to one other woman where her partner did all the really hard work, again, in a good program over a long period of time, and they're together and things are really good for them.
I think what we found in the men's treatment program, we really had to shift our focus of what was a good outcome. And a good outcome for us is that women felt supported and safe. And often that they were choosing to leave, but they left without all the use of the system, like his use of the system against her. So like there were ways that he dropped some of that aggression and kind of recruiting of systems. And so that became kind of where we had to put our focus, because men themselves were not really changing a lot. And so as therapists, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but we shifted our idea of outcome from men changing their belief system to, are women safer?
Right.
And so our whole program got centered around women's safety, which is exactly why both of them are coming. He's saying in some ways, I'm not safe, and she's saying, I don't feel safe. And so when you center women's safety, then we also had to evaluate from that perspective. And women would say they felt safer. They felt safer to leave. They felt safer to express themselves, but they didn't necessarily feel safe enough to stay in the relationship. So,
But there was some accountability for him, right?
Yeah,
the accountability
absolutely.
was really important.
Yeah. So stats are discouraging. You know, when you think about, Alison, what you're saying about not a lot of good treatment programs available, anger management programs are 6 to 10 weeks. Some of the probation programs here are 6 or 8 weeks long.
Yeah.
Like they're totally inadequate. And again, they're really just looking at some of the behavioral changes. Well, we would see behavior changes in the man within a week or two.
Oh,
and
that's
some of those
interesting.
sort of bigger explosive things. No
Yeah.
more raging, no more throwing things or threatening. Like that changed immediately. And that's the accountability part of it. But the deeply held beliefs, that doesn't change in
No.
weeks, months, years even.
Right. And I think it's worth noting too, is like those behaviors can change in his pattern, in the cycle
Exactly.
of abuse, right? So you
Exactly.
might see that quick behavior change in 6
Yeah.
to 8 weeks because all of a sudden it didn't serve him anymore
Right.
to
Yeah.
have those
Exactly.
explosions. And they may never serve him again.
Right.
So he's going to shift.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's going to be a shift. And so that's why the 6 to 8 weeks
Yeah.
is so short, and really you're really barely even dipping into the abuse cycle, right? Like you may be
Yeah.
just going to see the honeymoon and nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks is just not adequate at all. And so our program's around 24 weeks, which I think in today's lack of funding in this area just seems so luxurious, but it's absolutely necessary to see change. One of the things that we really often heard from men is that they accounted for their behaviors because of the pain that they had, their own trauma, their own history of witnessing abuse or being abused by a parent. And we've touched on that already, that's not an excuse for current behavior. But it's so tempting for counselors to go there.
Yeah.
Right? That how can he possibly be a full and healthy man in a relationship if he has all this pain? But we really put that on its head. Like we said, the crisis, the critical moment here is that he's putting his partner and children at risk. And that's what we need to deal with first. So first things first. And for us, that was he needs to attend to stop being abusive and stop putting his family at risk. And so it really, like most counselors cannot get their heads around that. It's contrary to much of what you learn and know.
Yeah.
But you can see how a focus on his pain makes him central, superior, and deserving. So the counselor
Exactly.
jumps in to the paradigm with him and becomes complicit in his entitlement
Yes.
when we do that. And what we need to do is hold women's safety as his job, and that pulls him into relationship because he has to think about what's the impact I'm having on her. And it's so different, but it's so effective. So instead of men coming back from a week and being able to report on, I used a timeout this week, or I had no raging, our questions weren't related to that. They were like, what impact did that have on you, on her, that you were paying attention to her rather than yourself? Right. And what's it like to see that you can support her needs?
Yeah.
When you did this, what do you think, what do you imagine were the consequences for her were? What did you think she felt? So really pushing on his understanding of how his behaviors impacted others. And that's not typical.
That's so
like,
nice.
It really is about going down those stories of his experiences of pain, and not to dismiss them, but they're not they're not first.
That's not
they're
where you
down
start.
the road. And they're not an excuse.
Yes.
So the more we join in that excuse, the more we join in the abuse.
Which really explains why because some women, maybe even many women, will report he goes to counseling and it actually gets worse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because there's this focus on his pain and what he's going through. And then also he sometimes learns language that he then uses, and it becomes all a little bit more crazy making.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
It's my trauma, right?
very counter to a lot of what our training was as counselors. And I think that can be a little bit humbling as a therapist, right? Like I just finished all my training, and to be told I've got it wrong is a little bit humbling. And so we need to just evaluate what is at the core here and what's the most important. And it's really just, we want to see the safety first.
Right.
And that's central. And then we're not saying those things aren't okay. Like, we don't think an abusive childhood is okay.
Right.
None of us think that.
Yeah.
But at the central point right now is someone is being abused, and that needs to stop.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's historical, and that this is current, and this is what we need to stop first.
Right.
You know, one example of how that played out is that men had to release confidentiality. Like, there was no confidentiality. Whatever they said in group could be transferred or shared with their partner, but that wasn't the same in the women's group. In the women's group, everything was absolutely held confidential. And so again, when counselors think about in a family systems place where everybody gets treated equally, that like kind of flies in the face of some of those principles. But if you're thinking safety, what is the right principle here that we share with women if there's any risk, and that we don't share any of her information, because that also could put her at risk. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, in the program, we really saw women's voices central, not each of them having a voice. And even as male therapists and the female therapists, we had to debate that, because male therapists kind of thought that they had a more important job than the women's support program. So we also had to struggle with and have them be a little humbled by realizing that they were using some of the same entitlement strategies and kind of superior strategies. So once we got clear that that we as the support workers really carried the authoritative version of what was happening in the relationship, it was easier for the male therapist to agree, or to really see how important it was to see women's voices as the authority in the relationship. And so we really put her voice as central. So we stopped debating who was right, because that can often happen. You know, the police come and there's a kind of negotiation about who's got the more accurate or right story. And women in front of judges often feel like they have to defend something that they've said. So it's really important that once you center women as the expert and the authority, all the work gets easier, right?
All in the name of becoming mutual, connected, and equal.
Right. Yeah. And so, like, he might say he was doing great this week, and the male therapist would report to us that he's doing great this week. And we're like, wow, that's not what we're hearing in the women's group. That we really didn't debate who was right. That we just really believed that women knew that they were still walking on eggshells, that he was still being demeaning, he was still kind of being manipulative or coercive. And so we just believed that. And then the question to the man would be, whose interest is it in for you to have us believe that you're changing, right? So it wasn't like, hooray, party because he's changing, but really it's not what's happening.
It really moves us away from what we see as a massive problem, over focus on the men, and particularly sympathizing with the abuser. And I love the term, actually, sympathize, because I do think that there is this sense where we are kind of drawn towards more sympathy for men and men's struggles, because ultimately we do live in a patriarchy. This paradigm shift it's just massive.
Yeah. I mean, when Karen and I do trainings, there are always people in the group, and we appreciate it, that they're having that struggle as well. And their question often is like either that we don't like men, or that we're being too hard on the men. So we just think we're not being too hard on the men. Women have been through a lot, and we are now asking for some accountability.
Exactly.
And it
Whether-
is
yeah.
worth noting, like, we have some really solid, incredible men in our lives.
Yeah. This is not the problem.
Yeah.
It is really about asking for people, which is kind of a cultural norm, to be responsible when they've done harm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we hope that people will spend some time thinking about these two paradigms. If you're a woman who's living with an abusive man or maybe separated from an abusive man, we really hope that this new lens will give you a lot of understanding for why your partner's doing what he's doing, and maybe you won't have to spend so much emotional energy on trying to sort that out. It might also help you understand why you keep getting accused of things that you're not doing, because he keeps assuming you're operating from this very selfish belief system. For professionals, we hope you'll take this research into your work, especially anyone who's working with couples where you suspect abuse may be what's going on. We hope that you'll really affirm women that they actually know how to do relationships and really hold the abusive partner accountable for his actions.
Yeah. So if you do want more information, please head to our website at whenlovehurts.ca. Show notes can be accessed on our website if you just go to the podcast tab. And as always, share, subscribe, so more people can access this content. This season was supported by the generosity of MCC Canada. And if you want to sponsor our next seasons, please connect with us at thewhenlovehurts.ca. Thank you.